Hi everyone and welcome back. This is day 2 of the Grand Swiss and unfortunately yet another loss. But this time I feel like I played better. Of course, I'm trying to improve the audio quality, the video quality, the quality of my chess, of course. But one thing at a time. I do want to go over my game. Today I played with the black pieces against famous Polish player Monika Socko. But anyway, let's jump straight into today's games. Later on, we'll take a look at the results of the top boards. So jumping straight in, I did anticipate a number of first moves. It's so difficult to prepare against someone who plays literally everything. e4, d4, knight f3, c4. And to be honest, I brushed up on pretty much all of these, but of course it's impossible when your opponent does play everything. I felt like it was still a good game, so let's begin. And I was very surprised to see the first move be e4. I was half expecting d4 just because of her game statistics. She has been playing d4 a lot more. And here I had a big decision to make, whether to go for my good old French or my Sicilian. The romantic opening. Yes, the French. The hon, if you must. The bonjour of openings. d4, d5, and bishop d3 came as a big surprise to me. Usually, I believe Monika plays this knight d2 line, which is called the Tarash. And of course, there were a number of responses by her opponent. There's been c5, there's been knight to f6, there's been takes on e4. And what I would have done at the board, of course, I do not know, but I think it would have been definitely a much more interesting game, but I ended up spending a lot of time here after the move bishop to d3. And to be honest, it excites me most when both myself and my opponent go out of our preparation, because that's when we spend our time really tapping into our true strengths. Of course, it is one thing memorizing a whole bunch of theory, but when my opponent is moving quickly in the opening, of course it makes me a little bit nervous that of course they know what they're doing, but I want to make sure, so I slow down. And as you can see, the time difference between the moves that I've made are quite long. So here I decided to take on e4. Of course, I just wanted to neutralize the center, but along with bishop takes e4, I might in fact just gain a tempo with knight to f6, and here Monika decided to retreat the bishop to f3, which did become a huge burden later on. And here I just went with c5, it came naturally. Here I'm completely out of my preparation, but it does still feel like a French type position, even though it's completely open. My bishop might still not have as much space, even though the center is open. And here, knight to e2. I had looked at different variations, such as d takes c5, queen takes queen, but my impression is that when you are higher rated than your opponent, and she outrates me by a good 500 points, you want to keep as many pieces on the board, because of course the more pieces they are, the more complicated it gets. And I think that's quite good advice to take. Complicate things when you're playing against someone low rated than you, because it gives them, it sort of puts the ball in their court, forcing them to make a decision. So knight e2 definitely made a lot more sense then. And here I decided to play knight to c6. Of course, taking wouldn't be such a good idea, because there are a lot of ideas of bishop to f4, targeting c7, and I'm completely underdeveloped. So let's go back to the current position, knight to c6, bishop to e3, and here there were a number of things I was considering. Of course, there's the natural takes on d4. I was also thinking about queen to b6. I haven't yet checked the game with the engine, but I'm sure both of these moves are rather playable. At the end, I did decide to take, but there are, like I said, a number of things I can consider here. I wonder... What I wanted to, in fact, do was capture, knight takes, and play knight to d5. Just to get rid of the power of this bishop on the diagonal, because I knew it was going to be... it was going to cause a lot of trouble for me to try and develop my bishop on c8. And to those of you out there who love the c8 bishop, I'm talking to you. So let's see. Knight takes, queen takes, and offering me a queen trade, and I was happy to accept. And here, the only problem I had, and even though we're going into an endgame, I was still having a lot of trouble developing my pieces. I had to sort out this problem. I have to get the bishop out, but unfortunately, I cannot just play, bishop to d7. I will make an example, bishop to d7, bishop takes b7, and rook b8. Because the bishop can retreat and I am not attacking this b2 pawn since the bishop is defending. So I had a very simple idea to try and solve this problem. I played bishop to d6. And if a normal move were to, happen, now I can play e5, bishop to c3, and I can play e4. And my problems are completely solved. And even if Monika decides to take on f6 with the bishop, I can simply take on f3, and at the end of the day, the bishop cannot promote, but my pawn can promote into a queen. So I think that position is completely winning for me. So that was my plan with bishop to d6, and Monika just decided to castle. Now I found that even though castling is such a normal move, in this position, e5 is completely impossible because of this rook e1, pinning the pawn to my king, and also probably losing the pawn on my side. Even if I decide to play like this, it's really hopeless. So let's come back. I decided to castle as well, and rook to d1. There was pretty much a threat with every single move that Monika made, and it's something that I really admire about strong players. They make sure that every single move does something. And in my previous game, I saw that I was losing 10p by moving the same piece many times in the opening, and then I fell to my immediate demise. My opponent found a way to exploit this and took the advantage. And this is why I'm constantly learning. The fact of the matter is I'm learning the most from these games that I'm losing, because I can see what my opponent is doing that I'm not doing, and it helps me improve because I'm always looking at myself and my play critically. So bishop to c7 after a long think. I think it took me here, 4 minutes or 5 minutes to decide on this move. 5 minutes to find bishop to c7, and my plan stays the same. So I still want to play e5 and e4. And Monika played knight to c3, but now the bishop is blocking b2. Although it's not entirely possible to play bishop to d7 now because of bishop takes f6. And even if I do have pawn takes, there's rook takes d7, losing a piece. So bishop d7 is just my biggest worry in this position. And honestly, I can't remember a point where I was able to solve this problem. So a6, stopping the knight from coming to b5, and knight to a4. And now I was under the impression that bishop to d7 works. Perhaps it was an inaccuracy, and I will show you why I decided to play bishop to d7 and what I was thinking about in this position. There was bishop takes f6, but then I continue with bishop takes a4, so that cannot happen. Then there is bishop takes b7, and I can just continue with bishop takes a4, and even if I'm losing the rook on a8, I have 2 minor pieces for a rook in this position. Okay, 2 minor pieces against a rook and a pawn, but it's still much better for me. Then there is, there was something else I was seeing. Bishop here, and bishop to b6 can be met with bishop takes h2, king takes h2, and bishop takes a4. So there are a lot of tactics that can happen, especially directly exposing my bishop to the rook, or yes, my bishop to the rook. That is, it's been a long day, please excuse me. And let's see. Ooh, no, that's not what was supposed to happen. That was a big spoiler. Close your eyes. Okay, so here after a6, Monika decided to play knight to c5, And now I think I played quite quickly, or actually not that quickly, 5 minutes, but I was just confirming my idea of playing bishop to c6. And the whole plan here was, if knight takes b7, I can take on f3, g takes f3, and perhaps in this position I can immediately play knight to d5. I'm a pawn down, but my compensation is that there is a weakness on f2 and f3, and eventually I will try to get my knight in. This pawn is always weak on h2, so maybe there is some compensation. But instead, Monika found something much better and decided to take here, take on f6, and even though I have a bishop for the knight, it's still not easy being a pawn down in this position, because I have 3 sets of isolated pawns, only 1 set of connected pawns. But I think I caught up at some point and tried to neutralize my weakness and maybe try to find some compensation for the pawn. But even after the series of moves, this was quite interesting actually. I saw g3 initially, and my plan here was, if I do go back 1 move, was to play f5, knight to g5, and now, after this move, king to f6, knight takes h7 is not so easy, because after king to g6, the knight is completely trapped. And even after a move like this, now maybe it gets complicated, because now there's rook d5, c4, rook to a5 and b4. And I actually don't know what the evaluation of this position is. It's probably losing for me. And so I decided to start with rook to d5. And after g3, the only vacant square for this knight, where it cannot be taken, is knight to g5. And I can continue with my plan. And if knight takes h7, king to g6, knight to f7, king f7. And the knight and king will dance around for a little bit. But Monika saw this and decided to play f4 instead, h6, and knight f3. I feel as though Monika played every single move perfectly, and I love that, because it challenged me to find a good move in response to that. And I think because of that, I ended up playing a lot better than my previous game. King to e2, and the whole point is, when you are down in material, you need to exchange pawns and not your minor and major pieces. And when you're up in material, you need to avoid exchanging pawns and just exchange your major pieces, because at the end of the day, if you are just left with kings and a bunch of pawns, in this position I'm completely lost. But with some pieces on the board, I still stand a chance of trying to get a draw, provided I stay 1 pawn down, and or neutralize, exchange all the pawns, and maybe my opponent will have an extra pawn, but impossible to promote this pawn when I still have pieces trying to defend. So here I exchanged 1 set of pawns. I want to avoid exchanging rooks, so I decided to play rook to b5, attacking the pawn. And now it's not entirely possible to take here, just because of this check. And yes, we are exchanging some pawns, but I think I end up losing 2 pawns, because after king to g7, rook takes c6 now hits a6 and c3, and I cannot afford to lose another pawn. So here I have to just opt for a move like a5. And I thought a5 was pretty good because I'm threatening a4. Knight, maybe here I should have taken, but I decided to protect my pawn on c6 instead, and my plan remained the same, going to a4. And a series of moves happened. We can go through them really quickly. And at this stage, I think it was much better for me to play a move like rook to e1. Reason being, after this move, I lose another pawn. Knight takes h5. I completely miss it, because king takes h5 leads to rook takes f5 check. And even if I try to attack the rook, the king captures my rook, defending, and it's completely over. I mean, it's over in this position, but a little more over had I continued to take the knight. So I think I was in those 5 steps of denial. I think I was sad, angry, and all the rest that comes after that. I try to pick up some pawns in the process, but I think even with the material that I do have, it's not enough to try and come back. And here I played on just for the sake of the townsfolk, and in this position I resigned. But congratulations to Monika for the point, and it was an absolute privilege to play against such an esteemed player. And tomorrow is a new day, but let's take a look at the results in the women's section and then the open section. There have been some big upsets in the women's section of round 2 of the Grand Swiss. Padmini Root took the victory over Grandmaster Pia Crumling. In addition to that, I lost my... No, I'm joking, it's not an upset. But let's take a look at the open section. Alexei Driev takes a win over Harikrishna Pantola. Ruslan Ponomaryov wins with the black pieces against Alyanov. And the remainder of the games are still going on. It's really exciting stuff, and to be honest, I'm so excited to be meeting all these personalities and seeing them in person. It's not often that I get the chance to do that, and yesterday I had the big privilege of meeting Badur Jobava, who is otherwise known as Exotic Princess or James Blunder. Yes, he's known for his dance moves on Twitch, and to be honest, I asked him what color his hair was, and he said it was pink. It does not look pink anymore. But like I said, huge honor to be here. And yeah, I will be back tomorrow. Wait, one more thing. You probably want to see the gloves, the mittens that the organizers got for us. And here they are. It's so warm. It was hand knitted. And to be honest, huge thank you to the organizers of this event. It's a sign of respect, but to be honest, this is my first pair of mittens. I love them. I love them. I love them. Okay guys, I'll see you tomorrow.